Tip Tuesday with Bassn with Buddy, and I told you I wanted to talk about two different things that I do to help me land bigger fish and prevent breakoffs. There's other things I want to add in there too, so it's actually more than just two things. The first thing is setting the drag. When I'm out there fishing, I set my drag as tight as it can go, and that's the first thing I always do. There's been times that I had set the drag too light, or you forget to set the drag tighter, and when you set the hook, the drag actually comes out way too much, and the hook doesn't penetrate the fish. So I always like to keep my drag as tight as it can go, so it's at the heaviest. So when I set that hook is penetrating that fish. All right, and now I'm talking about big fish here. You know, small fish, it really doesn't matter. I mean, the hook set always does matter, but it's I'm more so talking about bigger fish. So I always want that drag set super high. And when I set that hook and I feel that it's a good fish, and you know, it depends on where you are. Sometimes, you know, you might be fishing around grass or hydrilla or, you know, submerged cover, something like that. The fish might be wrapped around that. But this is not, I'm not including all that stuff. I'm talking about you're out there in open water, you're fishing maybe humps or something like that, fishing a point, and you set that hook and you have what you feel like is a monster on there. Now, anytime that I do that, depending on how far out that fish is, so if I throw it out and it's about, you know, 50 yards and I feel that bite and I set the hook, I really don't tamper with that drag, because that fish is probably going to tire out before he gets close to the boat. But if he's closer to the boat, you know, I'm talking about maybe like 20 yards and closer, and I feel that it's a good fish on, the first thing I do is I start to lower that drag a little bit. And the reason why I lower that drag is to help tire that fish out. I don't like to horse the fish that I catch, because, you know, you might break your rod tip or you might even snap the line. So what I like to do is, you know, I like to try to tire that fish out. And how I do that is when I set that hook and I feel that it's a good fish, the first thing I do is I start to, you know, put my finger on my thumb on the drag, and I start lowering the drag. If you start winding up and you feel like your line's not turning around the spool, you need to tighten it up just a little bit. But if that fish is fighting really hard, I just let that drag go out and I let that fish fight until it gets tired. A lot of people, you know, like to horse the fish and try to get it in the boat as fast as they can. They wind up snapping their line, snapping the rod, and, you know, you wind up losing a huge fish. So I like slowing or lowering that drag, letting the fish tire itself out, and then I bring it to the boat. One thing that people, you know, don't really think about is when you're fishing and about fish, is that a fish gets tired just like us. It's got, you know, little spurts of energy, and it starts to get tired just like us when we're sprinting. You know, you can sprint maybe 100 yards, maybe 300 yards, but after that 300 yards, you're exhausted. Same with a fish. If you can fight a fish for, you know, a minute, you know, or a little less than a minute or a little over a minute, that fish is going to get tired, especially with all those spurts of energy it's given, and it's going to start to get tired. I mean, as you have fished before, I know a lot of you probably have, you know, fish, you know, when they start to get tired, they'll float up to the top, and it's easier to reel the fish in, and that's what I like. You know, I don't let them float to the top and I drag them across the top of the water, but I like to let them tire themselves out so they're not, you know, putting any stress on my gear. But that's one thing that I do. Another thing that I do is if the fish is super close and I don't have time to set that drag, the first thing I will do is I will try to hurry up and open my bail. All right. Now I'm talking about bait casters now. I don't really do all that stuff with my spinning gear, because I set the drag to where the drag will just come out and I'll tire that fish and I'll bring them in. I don't ever really set my drag on my spinning gear too high, just because I usually use lighter line. I don't want to snap off. But the other thing is, if the fish is super close and they're biting at the boat, they're, you know, trailing that bait and they hit it at the boat, or, you know, you might be fishing a worm and you like to bring it all the way to the boat and they hit it at the boat. If I feel that and I set that hook and that fish is super heavy, the first thing I do, I don't really pay attention to the little gear system I have on the side to lower that drag. The first thing I do is I open that bail. But one key thing, when you open that bail, if I open that bail, you must keep your thumb on that spool or on that line to use your thumb as a braking tool. You need to have a brake. If you don't have a brake and that fish takes off, you're going to have a backlash and you're going to wind up maybe snapping that fish off, or you're going to be able to crank it up. All right, so they're the two things that I do. If it's out far, you know, I might not even mess with it. Like I said, I'll let them tire itself out. But if it's, you know, 20, or, you know, you can judge the distance. If you feel like that fish is real close and you're fighting and, you know, you don't feel like you have enough line out there, lower that drag and let that fish take that out. You know, let him tire himself out. Once you start to feel him tire himself out, tighten the drag up a little bit and, you know, reel him in. If he's super close to the boat or the bank, wherever you're fishing, this could be bank fishing too. If he hits it right at the bank, which it has happened to me several times, and, you know, I might be fishing a lipless crankbait, I zip that thing out there, I'm bringing it in, and he'll hit it right at the bank. I'm talking about a foot to maybe 2 feet from the bank. And that happened to me one time when I had caught a 9-pounder. And, you know, the first thing I did was open that spool. I pushed my button down, opened it up, kept my thumb on it, using my thumb as a braking tool, and I landed the fish. I learned to do those things because I had broken off or broken my rod tip on my rods, which, you know, costs a lot of money, especially if you have the, you know, high-end rods. You know, you just got to try to find ways to keep all your stuff safe and, you know, land those trophy fish. So they're the couple things that I want to you know, give you guys to maybe try to help you learn to land these bigger fish. I had fished with people several times, and they're horsing that fish in, you know, just grinding and grinding. Their line snaps, and they're just like so mad. And, you know, it's more so because you're horsing the fish. Now, there's several techniques that you may have to horse fish. You know, if you're fishing braided line and you have a strong, heavy rod, you know, and with some really strong hooks, you can horse fish. You can do that. Horsing fish means like you're overpowering those fish and you're cranking them in until they come into the boat. You'll see a lot of guys flipping those fish into the boat because they have really good gear to do that. I'm talking about maybe fishing any kind of line that's, you know, 17 plus, having real strong, durable rods with a good parabolic bend to it, or fishing braided line. Those guys out there, you know, they're flipping in some high hydrilla, or flipping into matted grass and stuff like that, flipping underneath docks or flipping into submerged cover. You're going to need that heavy stuff. You're not going to want to open up your bail. You're not going to want to you know, lower your drag, because if you do in those type of situations, those fish are going to try to find that cover and hide in it, and then you get caught up. You wind up snapping your line and breaking off. So there's certain times you want to horse fish, and there's certain times when you want to open up your bail and or lower your drag to, you know, fight those fish a little bit better. But they're the couple tips that I want to leave you. You know, just practice it. It's not going to happen the first time you do it. It's taken several, you know, months or you know, even a couple years for me to perfect it, and it helps me out tremendously, especially with big fish. You know, so practice that, you know, lowering your drag when you have a good fish in one, especially when it's close. Like I said, if it's really far out there, it's probably going to tire itself in, or tire itself out before it gets that close to the boat for you to have to adjust those drags or push that bail down. But you know, and pushing that bail down when they're super close and giving them that, you know, that line to you know, tire themselves out. But the key to opening up your bail, I'm talking about when you hook them and you open it because they're so close and they're taking that line out, is using that thumb and putting pressure on it to prevent it from spooling or backlashing or creating that bird's nest. Those are the couple tips I want to leave for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed those tips. Don't forget, hard work and dedication pays off. See you next time.